No one had ever asked me this before. What did I love? Right off the bat, I wanted to say I love the picture of my mother, how she was leaning against the car with her hair looking just like mine, plus her gloves and her picture of the Black Mary with the unpronounceable name. But I had to swallow that back. I said, well, I love Rosaline, and I love writing stories and poems. Just give me something to write about, and I will love it. After that, I really had to think about what else I loved. I said, this may be silly, but after school I love Coca-Cola with salted peanuts poured in the bottle. And when I'm finished with it, I love turning up the bottle to see where it came from. Once I'd gotten a bottle from Massachusetts, which I kept as a tribute to how far something can go in life. And I love the color blue, the real bright blue like that hat May had on at the Daughters of Mary meeting. And since coming here, I've learned to love bees and honey. And I wanted to add, and you. I love you, but I felt too awkward. Did you know there are 32 names for love in one of the Eskimo languages? August said. And we just have this one. We are so limited. You have to use the same word for loving Rosaline as you do for loving a Coke with peanuts. Isn't that a shame? We don't have more ways to say it? I nodded, wondering where was the limit of her knowing things. Probably one of those books she'd read after bedtime during the month of August had been about Eskimos. I guess we'll just have to invent more ways to say it, she said. Then she smiled. Do you know I love peanuts in my Coke too, and blue is my favorite color? You know that saying, birds of a feather flock together? That's how I felt. Here ends the reading.
Thank you, Perla. It's my favorite quote. Originally, when writing this speech, I wanted to make it really funny. But then I remembered that I'm not funny and that Connor Crutchfield would be the only one laughing at my jokes. So instead, I decided to write about something a bit more serious so that I could make you all feel really uncomfortable and awkward. Last year, a few students got themselves into trouble, and somehow a rumor was spread accusing me of ratting them out. Eventually, people realized that I had nothing to do with this scandal, but unfortunately for me, by the time they did, every ounce of self-esteem that I once had was completely destroyed. I'm a pretty confident person. I'm generally not all that self-conscious. I always try to make the most of any given situation. I like to get rowdy. I tend to be a wee bit loud. I'm inspired and passionate, and I make a fool of myself all the time. Basically, what I'm trying to get at here is that most of the time, I'm a pretty happy and outgoing person. And when this rumor spread about me last fall, I became so insecure about people hating me that I completely lost that happy side of myself, and I fell into a terrible depression. Last year, everything was sad. Sitting in chapel was sad. Walking to Spanish class was sad. Eating lunch was sad. Saturday nights, very sad. Sunday brunch, Shakespeare tragedy. I constantly felt like there was this giant gray cloud, sitting over my head just waiting to wring out some dirty liquid on top of me. I mean, I could not get away from this looming sadness that would engulf my mind and body and ended up ruining what could have been a really great year for me at SPS. I was depressed for a solid 14 months, and for 11 of those months, I was convinced that I was not depressed. It never occurred to me that crying alone in a closet for several hours a day or screaming at inanimate objects was a sign of depression. I just thought that because sometimes I was still able to laugh and have fun, that there was no way I could be depressed. I thought that if I was depressed, then everyone was depressed, because I didn't think that I had anything to be depressed about. Although I was still convinced my depression was non-existent, spring term I decided to go to therapy, which helped a little bit, but by the time the year ended, I was still far from better. Summer was a disaster. By the middle of August, I was in a pathetic state. I sporadically broke down crying all the time, I couldn't be alone, and it was incredibly difficult for me to laugh or have any sort of fun. My mom and dad kept asking me if I was depressed and if maybe I should try going on antidepressants. But I would just tell them that I was fine, I was just feeling sorry for myself. Eventually, they got pretty sick of that. If I was just feeling sorry for myself, then it was about time I snap out of it. My family members started to get frustrated with me and did not enjoy being around me anymore because I was so sensitive, defensive, and cold. One day, my mom sat me down and told me that while running errands with Summit, he approached her with a small book and said, "Mom, I think we should buy this for Georgia." My mom told me that she thought he was kidding, but then he said, "No, Mom, I'm being completely serious. I really think we should buy this for Georgia." I didn't really understand why she was telling me this, but then she reached into her bag and pulled out the book, and I looked down and read the title. Anxiety and Depression for Dummies. And that was when I finally came to terms with the fact that I was depressed. I had completely lost myself. The Georgia that I was when I first held that book in my hands was not the Georgia who I knew myself to be, or the Georgia that I aspired for myself to become. I was sick of being the sad girl, the moody one, the wet blanket, the party pooper, the murderer of fun. I knew something needed to change, and so my journey to find the happy me began. I didn't want to come back to St. Paul's this year. I wanted to run away from my problems and travel or study abroad. I ended up not running away, obviously, and wow, I am so glad that I decided to come back. This year has been so incredibly refreshing. It's like I had forgotten what it was like not to feel sad. Every day I'm amazed as I sit through chapel, walk to class, eat lunch, and so on, that I'm not sad. The glass is no longer half empty for me. I feel, well, I don't really know if it's happiness or indifference or what, but it just feels so good not to feel sad all the time. I can't get over it. What's been crazy is, well, you know that old saying, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar? My mom has always said that, and I've always understood what she meant, but not until I've had to live through it was I able to fully grasp its importance. People are attracted to positive energy, and positivity is empowering. I returned back to SPS this year determined to change my attitude and outlook on life. I would say things to myself like, "Georgia, your life is not a black hole. You are so fortunate and passionate and inspired. Your life is beautiful and full of exciting opportunities." Or sometimes I'd say, "Smile, you idiot. Smile and participate in this conversation. Do not retreat back to your dorm because it is easier to sulk in your bed and text your parents. Come on, you lousy good-for-nothing, just smile." And hey, maybe that's why the most commonly used adjective to describe me is crazy. But you know what? I'm okay with that. If little voices in my head have to coach me through life sometimes, totally fine with me. This year, people say hello to me without me saying hi to them first. People will randomly sit down next to me in Tuck or the reading room and start a conversation with me, at least when I remember to shower. And my friends want to know where I am or what my plans are for later so that we can hang out. It's awesome. I mean, that never happened to me last year. And why? Because I was so negative and sensitive and defensive about everything that no one really wanted to be around me. So friends, Romans, countrymen, here is what I have learned. The key to feeling like you're worth something is positive energy. If you feel good about yourself, other people will feel good about you too and will be attracted to your spirit. Sometimes I get frustrated because I feel like I wasted a year of my life. But you know, ultimately, I do not regret last year at all because I have been fortunate enough to move on. What matters now is that I have learned I have the power to change my life. And life is seriously so good. So good. And those of us that are able to recognize that and fully feel it are lucky. Because there are a lot of people out there who struggle every day to find happiness. Depression is really hard to fight. And I'm not even sure how I managed to do it. But if I could give any advice, I would say that if you're depressed, do not lose hope. Because I strongly believe that there is a light at the end of everyone's tunnel. Look, I'm no therapist. I'm just some passionate chick speaking from experience. Positivity is empowering and ultimately a self-fulfilling prophecy. Be positive and you can become positive. Some of you science geeks might argue that the laws of nature argue that the positive attracts the negative. But I say no. O-H-E double toothpicks, no. Not in the spheres of emotion, it doesn't. Positive attracts positive. So, my fellow Pollies, I am telling you, please, free yourself, empower yourself, and be positive. Thank you.